Greg Sargent wrote something in the plumb line today in the Washington Post about how the Trump threat is going to get worse. And let's keep in mind that Trump is no Hitler. Trump is no Mussolini. Trump is a punk. He's a fucking street punk. That's all he is. He's a whoring, crazed street punk who figured out how to screw people and steal lots of money. The son of a bitch hasn't earned a dollar in his entire life. But beneath him, the people who support him, and they support him for the reasons I've talked about so many times. He's a perfect figurehead. He's a dumb shit. He will do whatever he thinks will get him the most clicks, so to speak, the most praise, and he doesn't give a fuck where it comes from. It just so happens that it comes from the Christian fascists. Oh, he loves them, doesn't he? Well, up to a point. Only insofar as they make him the leader, the Messiah, the one they cluster around. And meanwhile, the Christian fascists, including scum like Steve Bannon, this bum-looking fucker, they look at Donald Trump as the empty suit that he is. They know what Trump is. The useful idiot that he is. They understand that. But as Sargent points out, the happy reading, or he calls it the sunny reading of the threat posed by Trump, goes like this. Yes, Trump hatched multiple schemes to overturn the 2020 election, but their implausibility, his incompetence, and the unwillingness of Republicans to play along suggests there's little to fear from his return in 2024. Well, we can hope that's true. But it would be ridiculous to assume that that's how it's going to turn out without the rest of us, sane people, taking active steps to prevent that outcome. And Sargent points out 3 political races in the Midwest that you're probably not following. And they illustrate the point with urgency. And there are 3 races I wasn't even aware of. All right. We're talking about, or Greg Sargent is writing about, the 2022 races for governor in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Now, the New York Times reports that Democrats are worried about these 3 races. They're not making a big deal about it, but they're worried in part because Republican governors in those states will be able to ramp up their anti-democratic Christian fascist tactics to a level that we haven't seen before in this country. And in all 3 states, there are Christian fascist-controlled legislatures. Now, please keep in mind, Greg Sargent is not using, I wish he would, he's not using the term Christian fascist in what he writes. He's using the term GOP-controlled legislatures. I will call it what it is, Christian fascist-controlled legislatures. But in all 3 states, the legislatures are controlled that way. And if any of these, of the 3 Democratic governors in them, and it's Tony Evers in Wisconsin, Democrat, Tom Wolf in Pennsylvania, Democrat, and Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, Democrat, if they are replaced with a Republican, if any of the 3, if all 3, it's all over. But if any is replaced by a Republican, it will mean unified Republican control. Because in all 3 states, the legislatures are controlled by Republicans. Okay. Now, most obviously, that will mean more voter suppression, other tactics designed to stymie the will of the political majority. That means taking your vote, Democrat, and making sure it does not count. And it doesn't make any difference what your race is, what your religion or lack of religion is, what your economic status is. It matters not. If you vote Democratic, you are fucked because your vote is not going to be there. And as the Times notes, GOP lawmakers and candidates for governor in those three states are pushing more of those anti-democratic proposals. Think about what has happened here in the state in which I live, Georgia, what the son of a bitches have done here, taken the power of conducting elections in the state away from the Trump-supporting Secretary of State, because he had the nerve to say that the election in Georgia was run fairly and that, yes, Joe Biden won it. So the legislatures in the three states I mentioned, controlled by the Christian fascists, are pushing more of this Georgia or Texas or Florida style political control of who gets to vote, how they get to vote, where they get to vote, when they get to vote, with the objective being to deny them the vote. That's what these legislatures are doing. And that makes these Democratic governors who are still sitting in the three states I mentioned bulwarks against more deeply entrenched minority Christian fascist rule. But Sargent points this out. More important is what this means for future election subversion. Because in those three states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, Republicans are pushing various efforts to audit or recount the voting from 2020 for president, which should be seen as a dry run for coming up with bullshit reasons for subverting future elections. This is what they're about. That has nothing to do with the 2020 election. These rancid son of a bitches in these states, they know who won. They absolutely know who won the presidency. Now, refusing to certify a Democratic win for president in one or all the states would require the cooperation from the state legislature. But if there's unified Republican or Christian fascist control in whatever the state is, that makes that almost certain, right? And while that might not survive a court challenge, in theory it could. A federal court could rule, look, it's up to the states to decide how they want to nudge, nudge, wink, wink, count the votes. It's up to the state. So if the state says that candidate Democrat did not win, even though he or she got the most votes, and if the Christian fascist controlled legislature says, in fact, candidate Christian fascist won the most votes, it doesn't matter what the vote count was, because, there was fraud. There was sneakiness, there was cheating. Then the court would probably just say, well, we're not going to get involved in this because this is a democratic republic. It's not a democracy. It's a republic. So if the state legislature and governor say together that the Christian fascist candidate won, even though their means of counting the votes look a little dodgy, it doesn't matter. Then he won, or she won. Okay. And then a Republican-controlled House of Representatives on the federal level would go ahead and count the rogue electors, the ones who shouldn't be there. Now, let's assume, as Sargent does here, that a Democratic Senate might still be in control of nominal Democrats, and the Senate might refuse to count the votes. But Here's something we didn't know. The Electoral Count Act of 1887 stipulates that both chambers must invalidate them, or they do, in fact, count. So a Republican-controlled House and Senate could both count the road electors, which would be an even worse scenario. So the point is, if the various states run by the Christian fascists determine the winner, not vote based on the popular vote, but based on the candidate that they want, the Christian fascists, and then passed it on up to, on the federal level, to the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the House of Representatives and the Senate, under the control of Christian fascists, would simply validate the lie, which is what Pence tried to do, which is what Trump tried to do, which is what the people who attacked the U.S. Capitol building were trying to do. You see where we are? Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.